everybody, and welcome back to episode 8 of the On Deck podcast. I'm your host, Roberto, and today we've got some interesting topics to talk about. We have Dave Roberts getting paid. We have a couple injuries to go over, and then I want to take a deeper dive into an MLB article on the most underrated players voted by the players. So we're in for a good one today. So off the top today, we have Dave Roberts signing an extension with the Dodgers. He's getting a 4-year deal with around $32.5 million. I'm really proud for Dave Roberts, and I guess all Dodgers fans are really happy. The Dodgers keep their guy, keep their manager for the next few years, especially after winning the World Series. I think it's well-deserved. This is their first quote-unquote real World Series. As many people, they discredit the 2020 COVID season. But at the end of the day, a World Series is a World Series. This banner still goes up. You still get a ring. Your name still goes into the history books. But real good for Dave Roberts here. Something that I did want to point out is that he is now the highest paid manager, beating out Craig Counsell of the Chicago Cubs. And with an AAV of $8 million, that's almost some players' deals this year, and he's a manager. He's not even playing, but glad to see that the Dodgers locked up their manager for their foreseeable future. And who knows, maybe he has a couple more playoff runs in those 4 years, gets extended again, and see what the future of the Dodgers holds, because with all those Avengers there in LA, in the starting rotation, in the bullpen, in the batting lineup 1 through 9, that's a lineup, even after the 4 years that his deal will expire, I think they'll have another dynasty in the making somehow. But now moving on to some sadder news, we have an update on the Gerrit Cole MRI and the second opinion, which has now resulted in him getting Tommy John, so he is now going to miss this season. And a little bit into the 2026 season, I think, just right off rip, I think you're usually projected to come back. I think it's 12 or 13 months, so that would put him around end of April, beginning of May to come back for next season. And as I've talked about before, this rotation takes a massive hit with Cole going down. You're now asking guys to grow into bigger roles, and and they're being asked to hold their own and then some to pick up the slack that they're missing from their ace of Gerrit Cole. And I kind of feel for the guy. He's been, again, like I said, one of the most durable pitchers in the last decade. And that message that he put out on Instagram, I, as a fan, I kind of felt bad for him, because he's been the epitome of health as a starting pitcher, and he's put up solid numbers. It's not like he's being healthy and putting up mediocre numbers. He's won a Cy Young already. He's been in conversations almost every single year. And honestly, he's been the epitome of a starting pitcher and the model of consistency for the last few years, because he goes out every fifth day, gives you a chance to win, and he wants to pitch deep into games, which honestly we barely see anymore due to pitch counts or guys just not being conditioned to throw deep into games, whether that have been from college or even at the minor league or major league level. We just don't see it anymore. And Gerrit Cole, throughout his whole career, has pitched deep into games, and meaningful games too, as we saw last year in the World Series. But overall, the Yankees are definitely going to be missing his overall presence on the mound every fifth day. Now moving on to the New York Mets, their catcher Francisco Alvarez is requiring surgery on a fractured left hamate bone, and this is going to put him out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And now, without Alvarez, their catching situation is looking very, very thin. You're now projected to have Luis Torrens take a lot of those at-bats and time behind the plate, also splitting it with minor league journeyman Jackson Reitz. But these guys are no Francisco Alvarez in the slightest. Francisco Alvarez took a big leap last year defensively, as he was never really talked about defensively. It was always more of his offensive output. and what projected him to be a great catcher offensively. But his defense came along last year and it surprised a lot of people. And now with him being out for the 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to have to deal with Torrens behind the plate and Reitz possibly splitting the time there. And neither of them have shown to be real capable MLB hitters. They're well below league average. They're more there as placeholders until Alvarez is healthy to come back. But what I'm thinking about is once Alvarez is healthy to come back, since that fracture was on his left hand, his catching hand, will we see more DH days once he's back? And, it'll be interesting to see what the split is compared to him and Torrens playing. Like, do we see Alvarez, once he's healthy and able to start catching again, do we see Torrens just strictly go into a backup role? Or do they, have Alvarez DHing and then Torrens catching, which obviously would then take away some at-bats from Jesse Winker, who was very productive as a Met after coming over from that trade from the Nationals. So it'll be interesting to monitor how often they have Alvarez playing in the future. Now, moving over to a more fun discussion that I have planned is there was an article that got released by the MLB, and they had asked players, who do you think are the top 5 most underrated players in the MLB? And I'm just going to run through them, and I want to get your guys' ideas, and I'll give my little thoughts about this as well. So coming in the 5th spot, we have Kyle Tucker. And I think he is rated a little low, just off rip. You'll understand once we hear the names that are higher up on this list, but through only 78 games last year, he hit 23 home runs, drove in 49, hit almost 290, and through 78 games, mind you, his WAR was 4.7. 4.7. If he had played out the whole year, and hypothetically speaking, let's say he put up an 8 WAR season just as a round number, that would have placed them tied for 5th overall with Gunnar Henderson at 8. The only guys that would have put up an 8 or higher WAR were Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani, Bobby Witt, and Aaron Judge. Like, that is some elite company to be in with. So I think he's rated a little low, but when we look at the player that came in the 4th spot, Jarren Duran, who put up a great first season playing full-time as the Red Sox center field and, dabbling in left field every now and then dealing with that monster, but he put up a great season overall. Through 160 games, put up 21 bombs, 75 driven in, hit 285, while also stealing 34 bases, which kind of goes under the radar. And he also led the league in triples too. And at 160 games, you can pencil him in that leadoff position almost every game, which is great for that Boston Red Sox team, which is going to make some noise this year for sure. But I think with Duran, his season went very quietly under the radar, and I can see him being put in here in the 4th spot as one of the most underrated players in MLB. But I think Kyle Tucker kind of has that edge because Kyle Tucker kind of gets lost in the mix with last year they had Altuve, Yordan, you had Bregman there obviously, but overall I think Tucker is the best player on that team, and to say that he's underrated is kind of a head scratcher to me, but I guess because he didn't play that whole season, he kind of gets lost in that mix. But moving on to a new Astro is Christian Walker coming here in the 3 spot. And I like Christian Walker as a player. I think he's very solid, great glove, especially at first base. Has won a couple of Gold Gloves, has some power for sure at the plate. But to say that he's underrated, I don't really agree with. Like, he has put up a couple of seasons of 30 home runs, and last season he was a little banged up, but put up 26 home runs, driving in 84. But to me, he doesn't scream underrated. On that Diamondbacks team, yes, you have the stars of Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll. You could throw in Gabby Moreno too, and all their slew of starting pitchers. But I think Christian Walker kind of slots in there as just like that solid 4 hitter that you're going to get production from. And to me, I don't know, I don't think he's underrated in my eyes. I guess in a sense you could say he's underrated because he has never made an all-star team. But outside of 2022 and 2023, where he put up a 5 WAR and a 3.8, he hasn't really shown anything to me in my eyes that can give him that underrated title. So if he could show up on this list, but I would have to slot him into the 5 hole, maybe in an honorable mention in my eyes. We have another controversial guy at number 2, and this is Lawrence Butler. And I talked about Lawrence Butler in the last podcast, saying with his swing adjustments, he turned into one of the better hitters in the MLB in the second half. And I can see how people would say that move was underrated, and that hot stretch that he had kind of went under the radar because, he does play for the Athletics. And I mean, they were a little interesting to watch in the second half with him being on that heater, but I think I need to see more out of Lawrence Butler to really call him underrated. If he puts up more consistent numbers like this and the A's are still the A's and not very good, I think you could call him underrated. He'd kind of be in that Jose Ramirez conversation where he's just consistently good and nobody really appreciates him. So that it's a short but sweet conversation about Lawrence Butler. I need to see more out of him this year. I hopefully this year he's able to make the All-Star team, so the league can give him his flowers for the adjustments that he made, and he's been having success with it. Hopefully that carries on into the next season and for the rest of his career. But I need to see maybe this year and next year to really give him that underrated title. And coming in at the 1 spot is, in my opinion, the best third baseman in the MLB, and that is Jose Ramirez. A lot of people have been saying that he's been underrated for the last 2-3 years because that third base has been such a loaded position. You have tons of guys, like you have Machado, you have Arenado, you have Austin Riley, you have Matt Chapman. There was one year where Brian Hayes was in that conversation due to his defensive ability. But through and through, I think Jose really stands out as that most underrated player in baseball because every single year he's going to give you 30 bombs, 30 steals, and he's going to drive in almost 100 runs. This year he almost went 40-40-40, which is insane. For a Guardians team that, wasn't to be reckoned with at the beginning of the year, and they had their ebbs and flows throughout the season, but Jose really carried them to the playoffs. And you could say that obviously he's the best player on their team and, he gets all the recognition, but he really doesn't. He was considered in some people's eyes the third best or the second best third baseman. And I think now people are starting to really see that he is a top 10 player in the MLB and, giving him his flowers because it's been a long time coming for J-Ram. I know this was all 5 of these players were hitters, but I do want to throw in a pitcher here into the underrated list. Maybe they might come out with one in the future, but I think Seth Lugo has been really underrated since moving into the starting rotation, both from San Diego and into Kansas City. With his workload and how much he is throwing and being effective, I think he's really gone under the radar as one of the better starting pitchers in the MLB. And it wasn't until this year and possibly even last year him getting some Cy Young votes. So shout out to Seth Lugo, eating over 200 innings at a 3 flat. Like, that is kind of crazy. So good on him. And I'd like to see it more next year for sure. But that concludes today's podcast. I hope you guys all enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on this underrated list below. I'm kind of curious to what everyone else thinks about this list. And if you have any hitters that you think were underrated but weren't mentioned, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate and review this on Apple Podcasts and 5 stars on Spotify. Again, greatly appreciated. Get the podcast out there. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.